the bus or take a taxi. And that's my point about public transport. If walking was more available, not for just from getting from here to the nearest bus stop, but really from getting from here, if I could easily walk from here to Wan Chai, it's actually not that far, but just psychologically, it seems extremely far because it's just not, it doesn't work, because it's a tortured path. So our public transport usage, 90%, very impressive, but the number of trips would be much lower if we could actually walk strategically. The chaplain was saying, you know, this hierarchy of the strategic walking in Hong Kong is basically non-existent. We are herded to walk to the nearest public transport facility. And increasingly, of course, we're building places that are only accessible by public transport. We all know Elements and West Kowloon, and good luck to all the geniuses who are working now on the master plan of West Kowloon. I don't know how you solve that problem. But, you know, we all suspect that Kai Tak and even the central waterfront here in Central, will be places where you have to get on public transport to get to, which is, I think, absurd. Point two, try connecting. It's been mentioned, I won't get into it very much. I just want to show you, again, a little analysis that we did about intermodal connections in Hong Kong and why, how that kind of feeds into the problem of redundant and inefficient transport system. You know, we're supposed to be intermodal. This is, you know, the typical MTR map that you get when you leave the station. Most people don't even pay attention, but in theory, you can go and see. It tells you where to go to, you know, the various bus stops and, you know, where the taxi is. You know, it kind of works if you can figure out where you're going and so on. But the reality is that while the MTR does an exceptional job providing very high level of service when you connect from one MTR platform to another. This is in Central when you go from the Tung Chung line to Island line. It's all escalators and enclosed walkways, very, very high level of service. When you try to connect to a different mode from Hong Kong Station, from the Tung Chung line to the PTI next door at Exchange Square, you know, it's very, very comfortable until you exit the MTR premises, at which point it becomes pretty nasty because you have to, you know, you walk outside the, you know, the railings. In fact, you have to cross the street in a place. Sorry, this is in a place that's is barely marked, and then you end up with a nice experience of walking, you know, through an active bus lane and so on. So what we did in our analysis, we gave it a level. This thing is, we gave it a level of service D, which is kind of a technical term. But what we said is that if Hong Kong, if the convenience of moving from MTR to bus in Hong Kong was as convenient as it was from one MTR line to the other, you know, the beautiful cross-platform transfers that we have, then maybe, and buses weren't just competing with MTR, and the systems are more integrated and compatible, we could reduce the number of journeys that need to be taken by buses and reduce congestion on the street. Final point is about the better design of transport infrastructure. This is something that was, again, touched on by, especially we saw beautiful images of European cities with grassy medians and beautiful new trams running on them. We can't hope for that in Hong Kong realistically, but we can do a little bit better than this, which is, you know, sort of the nasty PTIs under the podium. You know, we have some elevated trains. It's always a problem in every city. Elevated trains are not a very friendly feature in a city. It can look better. Again, maybe in environments where there's fewer people, but it doesn't have to be something that's very heavy and concretey. And even if it's elevated and it's not a very beautiful design, you know, there are places like Tokyo where, and there are other examples where that infrastructure can become part of the city as opposed to something that feels like a piece of infrastructure that was dropped on the city in an unfriendly way. Wall effect. We always talk about wall effect of buildings as wall effect of buses, and especially double-deckers. So the beloved PTI near the Star Ferry in Tsim Sha Tsui. I sympathize with, you know, the heritage value of this place, but, you know, it's not. Let's face it, it's not really something that I enjoy having kind of blocked the view. And you know, PTI is sort of open air bus terminuses can be designed in a more, a little bit more friendly way. And then our unique contribution to the bus terminus design, which is the under-podium PTI, very unpleasant for both passengers and for the city because it creates discontinuities at street level. Compared to what they've done in Madrid, at huge expense, I have to say. In Madrid, they took all the buses from the street level, buried them underground. Basically, the street went back to pedestrians, and they created those, what in Hong Kong would call PTIs, bus terminuses, where the buses are underground, the people are underground, but in an enclosed environment. So it's a very comfortable environment for people, for pedestrians. The buses are removed from the streets. You don't have big buses idling on the street or sort of massive pieces of land that are dedicated for buses. Another wall effect, obviously, we have notably Hennessy Road, Devoe Road, Nathan Road. We have these sort of convoys of double-deckers and so on. This is luckily not Hong Kong, but this is in Guangzhou. But just an example of what can be done to rationalize that and maybe improve it. This is Guangzhou about a year ago or 2 years ago. And this is Guangzhou today. What they did, by introducing a BRT system, and actually the diagram that Chapman showed about the bus lines in Hong Kong very much lends itself to this kind of a thing. What they did, it's the same road. They removed all the buses and kind of channeled them all through a single corridor and reduced the number of buses. First of all, they reduced the number of buses because they share this sort of a trunk line. The chairs, so there's a lot of capacity sharing in that trunk line. But also, the impact on the street, instead of the mess of trying to, and we see that same, standing in front of Pacific Place, there's like 5 bus stops, and the buses just pile one after the other. There's a way to tidy this up, and reduce both the number of trips and the impact on the environment if you begin to organize it in a similar fashion. Yuen Long, we have, it's kind of a bit out of sight. We have very light, we have the light rail, which feels, again, very, very heavy on the street with all sorts of barriers and just the design details. Again, this may never look like Bordeaux, but it can look, a little bit better. This is in Melbourne. We can create tram infrastructure that is much lighter, has a much lighter touch on the street to create a better environment. Likewise with ferries, the central ferry area, ferries do claim land on the water, but there's an easy way of doing it. If I can, in this case, just show something that we've done. We've been doing some ferry terminal designs in Dubai, and there's a way to maintain a promenade along the waterfront and the ferry structure that isn't as heavy, and this is more of a landing. But again, we very deliberately kept continuous walkway and bike path and so on. So to conclude, somehow the first thing disappeared, but how do we make public transport more sustainable? Well, first point, more walkability, less transport. Better intermodality, less transport. And finally, better transport infrastructure design will lead to less negative impact on the urban environment. Thank you.